This episode of Angles is brought to you by Richmond Vona Personal Injury Attorneys. Expect high-level communication, transparency, and cutting-edge technology to keep your case moving. Expect a legal team that's laser-focused and moves fast to get the results you deserve. When the unexpected happens, expect Richmond Vona. Learn more at richmondvona.com, 192 Seneca Street, Buffalo, New York. Welcome to Angles, the podcast where we dig into the stories behind impactful people and explore the sharp turns, daily decisions, and defining moments that shape how they got to where they are and how they keep moving forward. I'm John Richmond, and every week I sit down with guests who are building bold, meaningful lives and careers in Buffalo and beyond. If you enjoy these conversations, please hit follow, subscribe, drop a comment, or share the episode. It's a simple way to help us grow with the community and keep these stories coming. Today I'm joined by Tom Prince, Vice President of Western New York Athletics and the familiar voice behind the region's high school sports broadcasts. Tom took a volunteer baseball blog and turned it into a full sports network, live streaming games and shining a spotlight on student athletes. We'll dig into passion over paychecks, the year-round pressure on kids, and how true leadership shows up on and off the field. If you love sports at their purest, this episode's for you. Let's get into it. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you for a while, and I've been just really intrigued to see you in action out at local sporting events and learn more and more about the local sport community, especially as a former athlete myself. And I guess I wanted to kind of jump right into it because there's so many things I want to talk to you about. But for those that don't know, like, what is Western New York Athletics and how did you get involved?
So Western New York Athletics is actually the one entity that just covers high school sports. That's the only thing that we're out there doing, and we'll cover them from articles to interviews to live streaming events. So it could be all of the above that we're out there talking about, but we're there to just help the high school athlete and promote the high school athlete. That's it. Versus everyone else, if they're news kind of related, we'll cover every sport and every single entity that is outside of high school sports as well.
Right. So
how I got started is pretty interesting, though. So in my different jobs, one of the jobs that I had was the digital sales manager over at Channel 2. And I got to know two incredible people there while I was at Channel 2. One of them being Stu Boyer, who we talk about all the time on the air because Stu and I do a lot of things on air together. But Stu, whenever it was something high school related, he would always come over and make sure that he talked to me and said, "Hey, have you heard about this? Have you heard about that?" And then obviously then got involved with the different sports that were out there. And it all started at Channel 2. And it was just getting my opinion on what I felt, what I thought about the process. And then I was about to get my first live broadcast with Channel 2. Where they were streaming the high school sectional championships, and I was the next one ready to come in. I'm sitting in the back of the booth waiting to come in, and then Spectrum said, unfortunately, because they own the rights to the streaming, we weren't allowed to do it. We had to stop the broadcast right there.
Ah, brutal.
And so I'm like, no way! I'm about to do the first time. So, all good, and then. At the time, I actually went to the station manager and I said, "Hey, listen, we cover football. We do a little bit of basketball. Who covers baseball?" And I meant just from the high school's perspective. And he goes, "Nobody." He goes, we don't have the funds. We don't have this to be able to do. And I said, "Okay, no big deal. Can I do it?" He said, "Well, I don't have the extra money to do it." "I don't want any money for it. I just want to be able to give these kids recognition." He goes, "Yeah, absolutely, sure, go ahead and do it." So I started doing the baseball page on WGRZ Channel 2. That's where it kind of all began. Then about a year later, I got offered an incredible opportunity to get back into pharmaceutical sales. And I literally went to both the station manager and my manager. I showed them everything. I go, "Listen, I just can't say no to this." And they kind of looked at me and they agreed. So what had happened then, I said, "Well, listen, I'm still doing this baseball stuff. Can I keep doing it?" And they were like, "Yeah, absolutely. Keep doing it. You can do it. It doesn't cost us anything. No big deal. We've never had anything but positive things said about it. We're all good." So unfortunately, the process was I had to send everything into somebody. They had to kind of go through it and then post it later.
Yeah.
So I was finding it was taking like 3 to 5 days to get things posted for anything baseball related. And 3 days later could have meant 2 more games in the meantime, and everything I was doing was really old news.
Yeah.
So I realized, this is going to be tough for me to keep things here. So I went over to Frank Wolf at Western New York Athletics, and I kind of said, listen, you want all the baseball stuff I do? He's like, are you serious? I go, yeah, I'll put it all on the Western New York Athletics platforms. And then that's how it began. And then all of a sudden goes, do you know football? Do you know basketball? I was like, yeah, I coach both of those sports, absolutely. I'm a track guy as well, so I know those things. And he says, well, let's try on some of these things. And then before he knew it, I'm kind of been a color commentary guy for, it pretty much doesn't matter the sport. If I don't know it, of course, I'll learn a little bit more about it, or it's something I've already coached or experienced myself in some sort of format.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And look, I mean, obviously, you're not getting rich, covering high school sports, but I think it just, it goes to your passion for sports, for, helping kids. Where does that all come from? Is this something you've always wanted to do, and you just all of a sudden you're like, I have this opportunity, I can't skip it?
It really comes from all my coaching. I've coached so many years, and I've coached football, basketball, baseball. Like, it doesn't matter. I've always done it, and I've given back to that. I've run and created what was called the South Towns Travel League, which was a travel league for baseball players. So it kind of, when my kids were done, and then it was, okay, well, I can't commit this type of time to coach a team, so what's next? And that's kind of how it all began and started. It actually started by Jordan, my middle son, and Luke, my youngest. They were still in school when I had started this whole process, and definitely didn't plan on it growing to what it did. But once I started and I got so passionate about it, how can I not do it at that point is what it was. And that's really where it just took off from there.
Yeah, I think it's a great lesson in that, if you're in it for the right reasons, and if you're passionate about something, you just keep your head down, you keep chipping away at it, and all of a sudden this thing grows into something that you never really could have ever imagined, which has got to be pretty amazing for you, sitting there looking at it with everybody over there in the organization saying, look what we're building. Like, this is pretty wild.
It really is. And a lot of that passion, when I said to you 2 people at Channel 2, the other one was legendary Dick Gallagher, who is known as the godfather of football here in high school sports. And that's where the passion became from. We would sit at lunch. My lunch hour when I was at Channel 2 was normally going upstairs, sitting down with Dick, and we talked high school football. It was the best lunch I could have ever asked for. And that's where a lot of that passion started to come in. And then when I went over to Western New York Athletics, eventually Dick came over to Western New York Athletics and was doing a podcast with Frank Wolf to really start the merge together of both of the things that we were doing to be able to get more coverage for these young men and women.
Yeah, high school sports, there's sports in like their purest form, right? Like, nobody's getting paid. Kids are out there, fighting every day for their love of the game to try to earn that scholarship, or even if they know, like, hey, I'm not going to go play college, I'm still going to be out there every day, giving it my all for my teammates. But there's definitely been a lot of changes over the years in high school sports, and you've obviously had a first row kind of seat to this. What do you think are some of the biggest changes that you've witnessed, like, especially like maybe since your kids were younger, or maybe even going back to when you played to kind of where we are now?
The first thing probably is the 3-sport athlete. You don't see that as much anymore. Back when I went to school, it was an automatic, right? You played the fall sport, you played the winter, and then you played the spring. That's not the same anymore. And part of it is because every sport, no matter what it is a year-round sport. So if you were to do the 3 sports that we talked about, you better be ready then in the off season. You may be doing basketball and football training while you're playing baseball. And then while in the football season, you better be ready that you're going to have to go practice for baseball in the winter during the football season.
Yeah.
Or during the basketball season. It doesn't matter. All the sports now have turned into a year-round sport, and you better be able to participate or you're going to be left behind or not taken on a team.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember playing hockey growing up, at a certain stage, when it got really competitive, you would say like, okay, I'm going to play on this summer team, but it was like a few tournaments. And now, I talk to my buddies whose kids are playing competitively in hockey, and it's crazy. It never ends. I mean, it's nonstop for these kids, and you just hope that the kids love it, because otherwise that's pretty tough, right? You're not getting out there a lot of times to go out there and be a kid anymore.
And you got to also look at what's happened. You alluded to it when you talked about what we did during the summer. We played on what was called an all-star team is what we played on, right? I put that in quotes. But you played in the Little League World Series. What you were doing is playing on some sort of all-star team. And when you got knocked out, it was over. That was when it ended. Maybe they got you in a game or two later, but for the most part, that was it. Now, these parents are paying thousands and thousands of dollars for them to just be on a travel baseball team. And they're going to travel to, doesn't matter, let's say to Maryland. They're going to be in Ohio. They're going to be in Pennsylvania. They're going to be in, obviously, different places in New York. Not only are you paying those thousands of dollars that we just discussed just to be on the team, you're also going to pay hotel rooms, airfare, gas, if it's just, something that's local.
Oh, yeah.
And now, so you've turned this into a multi-$1,000 investment. And if you're going to coach one of these teams where a parent has paid thousands of dollars, guess what now the expectations are? I paid you money. You better make sure my kid gets the experience they're supposed to get. And if I think he's a shortstop, you better play him at shortstop, or you better play him on the mound. It is now come a whole different dynamic because of the money that's involved.
Yeah, for sure. I've learned a lot about other sports and the commitment levels and everything you're talking about, honestly, through you, because my experience really is in hockey, and it is pretty nuts. And there's a fine line, right, between, I guess, hey, I'm paying this money because I know my son or my daughter is really passionate about this, and I just want them to be happy and I want to support them, versus I'm paying all this money, and because I'm paying all this money and putting all this time into it and I can't do all these other things, you better go out there and perform, and the expectations are high, and I want you to get a scholarship and all this kind of stuff, and it can be really, really tough on kids. Have you seen, or how would you kind of compare like the athletes that have like come out of here and really made it? Like, do they tend to come from families where it's more of like the former, where like, hey, we're paying, we're just here to support you, or the latter of it's like, hey, we're paying, and like there's tons of pressure on them, they're being forced to practice all the time and all that kind of stuff?
It's a little bit of both. It really is. We just had a young man that was just drafted 5th round. He went to N-Trip is where he went for his first year of college. He's a Cheektowaga graduate in high school, and he's now going to be on the Minnesota Twins in the 5th round.
That's amazing.
And this is a kid that played travel baseball, went and did everything there was. His dad was out there as a big, his parents were phenomenal. They were true parents that aided you in the process, right? They weren't parents to me that got in the way. It was always positive conversations with those parents whenever I was even around him. But here's you're talking about I want to say he's 6'5", 6'6", is what he is. Has got all the dynamic, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. But again, it's all about being seen. And once you get to the next level, when I say the next level, that's college, it doesn't matter whether you go the JUCO route, whether you're a Division III route, whether you go Division I. If you're that good, you're going to be found, because you can't deny or hide somebody at that point.
Yeah, especially in this day and age, right?
Absolutely. But even more, John, with the new rules that are out there, JUCO doesn't take away necessarily from all your 4 years that are out there. Now JUCO becomes, to me, the route that you want to go instead of getting redshirted and sitting on a bench somewhere doing nothing, when you could go the JUCO route. And here's a kid, goes JUCO, gets offered by Tennessee, so he's got a full scholarship to Tennessee, and now gets drafted 5th round.
That's wild.
you right now got to pick your choices. And what'd he do? He went to Niagara Community College is where he went to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Niagara
Everyone.
County Community College.
Yeah. I think it's a great lesson, whether it's in sports or anything. I mean, everyone has a different path, and there's usually no one right path to success or to get to where you want to go or to meet your goals. You have to figure out what's the best path for you. It reminds me of like Devin Levi and the Sabres, where, he was playing in a slightly lower league up in Canada, and people they were getting mad at his parents, like, you got to step him up, and he waited, and then he ends up going to Northeastern, obviously setting all these records, and obviously now we're hoping that he's going to be the savior in net for the Sabres. But along those lines, you mentioned somebody who you've gotten to watch, really progress, and now you can just tell that you're proud of the kid, for what he's accomplishing. Are there certain traits that you noticed in someone like him, or maybe other great male or female young athletes who go on to the next level? Certain like characteristics or traits that you think are consistent amongst them?
I mean, obviously, it's always going to be work ethic. You're going to hear it. It's going to be somebody that lives in the gym, that does all the right things. Joe Mack is the other one that we could be talking about. A Will East graduate is what he was. He was a catcher, comes out of Will East. By the way, both of these guys were at my senior all-star game that I did, which is even cooler. Joe couldn't play because he got drafted, and he wasn't allowed to play because of the draft.
Yeah.
And Matt actually did pitch in my all-star game, which I thought was awesome to look at this. But here's Joe Mack right now. Here's a Will East kid that is right now played in the AAA, the Futures All-Star game. He is the step before he's about to get to the major leagues. Like, we've had some great players that have come through here that really you can see it's that never give up attitude.
Yep.
It really is.
I agree. And it's interesting to like kind of think about what fuels it, right? And that's kind of like what I think about with like parents who pressure their kids too much, is like, if your kid has that passion, you're going to see it, you're going to feel it. You're going to know that, he's out there taking extra reps when the other kids are, off, riding their bikes or doing whatever they're doing. In my world, it was like, this is the kid who's destroying their parents' garage, shooting hundreds of pucks every night where his buddies are out, doing whatever. And that's fueled by passion. And I know that there are some parents who force their kids to do it. And I think it can work, right? We've seen kids who have gone on to play at really high levels, been all-stars in different sports. But I tend to think that if you don't have that passion, at some point, it's going to die off, because what's going to fuel you to work that hard and to keep, pushing forward? Because as you go to every level, it gets like exponentially harder.
No doubt. And it doesn't matter the sport, but you look at some of the different entities you talk about. Look at a Dylan McDuffie, plays for the Green Bay Packers. Here's a Bennett kid that played against my son, in fact, right? That you can see is, he had a dad pushing him with his father. His father's one of the top coaches in the area on top of it. He pushed him out there to be his best that he can be. And here's somebody who went out, did what he needed to do, and absolutely has made it. And I'll tell you, you talk to Coach McDuffie, and he says, I'm going to push you as hard as I can inside that weight room to make sure you are prepared to go everywhere in the next level, next game, whatever it is in front of you. I'm going to push you and get you ready.
And I think that can be great so long as the kid wants to do it, right? And, you both, again, you have this unique perspective because you've coached, you do color commentary, you are a parent, right, yourself, and you've seen it all with your own kids. What advice would you have maybe to offer to parents who like don't know when to push or when to pull back? Like, how do you kind of know?
You need to listen. That's one of the toughest things. Sometimes we just don't listen to the kids in front of us when they're communicating and telling us what they need or what they don't need, in essence. And sometimes, we're pushing an agenda that we think this is what's going to happen to get you to the next level,
right,
or get you better, or be able to hit that ball farther or catch that ball and run faster, when really is, if they don't believe in what we're teaching or what we're preaching, they're not going to do it anyway. It'll eventually just simmer down right behind your back, and it will absolutely fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I I think too, like everything we're talking about, right? This is why I love sports so much, or one of the reasons it's, you know, it really prepares you for life, whether that's in business and medicine, you know, or just being a good person, or, you know, a father, a mother, or whatever it is. I mean, there's so many lessons you learn. When you think back about, you know, your athletic career, what do you think, and even now today as a coach, what do you think are the biggest lessons you've learned from sports that have helped you kind of become who you are today?
Leadership. That's one of the biggest things I can always take away. And in fact, you know as well as I do, I've done tons of hiring and things along the way right now. And I will look back at your high school and your college, what you've done. I want to see that you I want to see that you were a captain. I want to see you were a leader. I want to see that you were effective in your sports, because I know if you did it there, you put in the time, you did the things necessary, and if you were named a captain, that meant you were either a leader in the eyes of the coach, or you were a leader in the eyes of the people that were around you. That to me is somebody that I want on board and that I'm going to take a chance on, versus somebody who doesn't show those different attributes.
Right. Yeah. I'm always, my interest is always piqued when I see athletics, and it doesn't even have to be at a high level on somebody's resume. I just think you can learn so much about, like you said, leadership, what it means to be a member of a team, you know, what you can accomplish when you're part of something that's bigger than just you. There's so much to that. Now, I got to talk to you about the color commentary stuff, because like this is something like as like, you know, most kids, you grow up and you have your favorite broadcasters and people that have called these biggest games or moments, maybe you know, in your life, like things that you always remember. You know, did you always know you wanted to get into that, and how did that kind of happen?
No idea. I really didn't. It was something that kind of, it all started, like I said, when I brought all that stuff over to Western New York Athletics for the baseball side. That's when Frank Wolf just said is like, hey, you know, do you want to give this a shot? And I said, yeah. It was when we were really had a small staff that, you know, you were able to take a chance on somebody like me. And I did it for baseball, and I loved it. It was something that just became very natural, in the sense of I just knew so much about the players. I knew so much about the game that I could easily have that conversation, so that I could make sure that I was an asset to somebody on air. I still had to learn a lot of the give and takes and how I need to keep my mouth shut sometimes, you know, so I wasn't talking over the play-by-play guy. But really, that's where it started. And before that, because we weren't doing on-air stuff, it was the interviews that I did. And that, to me, was something where, you know, I was doing my own stick that I think people expect and like to hear now, is I get really loud when I'm about to introduce my interview. But if you ever notice what happens when I get really loud to introduce my interview, take a look at the girls and boys that are on either side of me. Usually you'll get laughs, you'll get giggles, you'll get things. But what it did is it calms them all down. Yeah. And normally I don't have to do retakes, because they're all calm, and I get their natural answers of what they want to do, because they've just been laughing at something that I just did.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, it's like when you're not used to being on camera, it can be really nerve-wracking. So when somebody does something like that, it just like kind of breaks the tension. And you're like, okay, and you just kind of settle in, and before you know it's over. I remember the first time I ever had to film something, it was a nightmare. The first time Keith and I ever filmed a commercial, a lot of F-bombs, a lot of like retakes. Like, it was so bad. And you just feel bad for everybody who's there working, because you know they're working on so many sets with people who know what they're doing. And you're just like, I'm so sorry. I'm just wasting your time. You know, I've been at events with you before. And I remember going to the Orchard Park Bennett football game a couple of years ago, and I was laughing, but like in a good way, about you're like a local celebrity at these games, and all the kids know who you are, the parents know how you are. You know, how does it feel to be out there and to be so welcomed in the local community, and to obviously be somebody that the kids look up to?
Honored. It's nothing more than I'm honored. I never would have thought that, and but hopefully it's a testament that everybody knows that I'm out there giving everything to them to making sure they can have that moment right there. No, a lot of people don't know is I don't get paid for any of this. Like, I don't want the money. I'm not in this for the money. I do it because I want to give back to the kids. When I coached, I didn't get paid for what I did. I paid just as much as anyone else did on my team so that my kid could also play on that team. And a lot of people don't realize a lot of that behind the scenes, because what I really wanted to do was to make sure, one, everything was an even playing field when I was a coach, but at the same time is I know what it's like to not have that article or not have that moment or not have that recognition to use for colleges. I mean, you were taking little snippets out of newspapers back when I was in the day, and I'm not from the area. I went downstate. I was actually in Section 9 is where I competed. But you were dying for any of those articles to have somebody come out. Now, it was great because they usually gave out little blurbs so that I could use a little blurb that says, see, this is exactly what I did in this meet. But could you imagine being able to say, I was named player of the game, look at my interview, look at what I say, look at how I sound, look at how I recognize my teammates, look at how I make sure everybody gets the recognition. These are all things that are countless to be able to help you out, to go out there and be able to get recruited. Doesn't matter whether it's 1, 2, 3, JUCO, I don't care what it is. All these things will help you in that moment to be able to get recognized.
Again, it's awesome. I mean, again, you're doing all this for free, and it really is a great lesson. And everybody really should have something like this. Everybody, you have time to give back. We all think we're so busy, and yeah, we all are busy. But let's be real, and you put a lot of time into it. And I'm not saying, everybody's going to go out and put as much time into such an amazing passion as you do, but I would really encourage people to go out and find something that just makes them happy. And it's okay if the thing that makes you happy is because you're making somebody else happy. Like, that's okay. And it's really cool that you continue to do that. When you call games, do you ever have trouble like staying neutral? I always wonder with color commentators, are you ever rooting for one team more than the other? How do you think about that?
So yes. Normally when I get into the state playoffs, and I've covered Section 6 teams, and now I'm going to Section 5 versus Section 6, because I know so much about the Section 6 teams, I really try to make sure I am playing fair balance right there, because obviously the listeners are coming from both ways, and you don't want all that negative press to come say, oh, what a homer, that's all he's saying. So that's harder for me, because I really have to make sure I do extra work to make sure I got all the information that's necessary to have a good broadcast that way. Locally, I take a lot of pride in myself that I don't do that I'll always find the positive. I'll never go negative on a high school player, and everyone that covers me knows that. I won't go negative. I don't care if I know something negative. I don't care if I've seen nothing negative. It'll be dropped. I want to go on to the positive of what I'm seeing and all the different things that you can bring to as a player in a positive note. I'll even, when I'm doing color commentary, you'll see me point out things like sportsmanship and the things that are not recognized normally on a broadcast that you would watch. There are things that I may see. I think sometimes it's a little different than what somebody sees that I bring to the table, and I think that's been the kind of refreshing difference that I bring versus somebody else that may be out there.
We'll be right back after a word from our partners.
After an accident, life can be scary, stressful, tricky. You need Richmond Bona to help navigate the process, because getting a life-changing settlement can not only take time, it can take an emotional toll. The team at Richmond Bona provides high levels of support through all the ins and outs, so you get the settlement you need and the new beginning you deserve.
When the unexpected happens,
expect Richmond Bona.
Now back to the conversation. Yeah, I'm glad you talked about sportsmanship. It's huge. I actually was just watching, I think it's a current season of Quarterback on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but it every year they do it, and it follows some quarterbacks, and they're following Kirk Cousins amongst some other guys like Jared Goff and Joe Burrow. But they're showing last season when Cousins lost a starting job to Penix Jr. after a few bad games. And the first thing he did after he had this, like, probably the toughest meeting of his career with the coach to find out he's no longer starting, is to call the new quarterback, call Penix Jr. and be like, hey, congratulations, the job is yours. I mean, it's an amazing thing that, and even if you don't want to do it, like, it's the right thing to do, and it does make you feel good, and it's something that's, you got to stand up for what's right, and you have to do things like that. What is, like, maybe, like, the greatest act of sportsmanship that you've seen, here locally in Western New York?
I don't know if I've had this tremendous act that I could sit here and say, like, oh, this is it. It's just little things that you see on the field. In other words, I want to see a leader out on the basketball court coming to put his arm around somebody when it may have been a shot that was missed, saying, hang in there, I'm with you, we're going to make it happen. I've seen that on the football field, where you've just seen a captain come over and truly be a leader on the field. Or, listen, you've also seen somebody come in and knock a quarterback on his backside, and instead of going out and doing some dance and showing that you did it, you went over, you helped him up, you gave him a pat on the backside and said, hey, listen, see you next play, whatever it is that you're going to do. But it's all positive out there. That's the stuff that you're going to see me point out, because that's the stuff that you, if you're at the next level as a coach, you want to see. You want to know that they have those things inside them, that they're not going to be that bad person that you're worried about for whatever reasons that are out there. But these are just another reason just to show the character of a young man or woman that's out there and why they're separating themselves on whatever sport, whatever field they're on.
Yeah, and I would, encourage parents, like, if, you see your kid, leading like that and showing active sportsmanship, that should be highly rewarded. I mean, and really praised, right? That's a big thing. And I think back, like, when I was a kid, and I try not to think about all the bad games I had. There's too many to count. And I was very, very lucky to have parents who, would give me some space, and then ask me if I wanted to talk about it. I was able to talk to them about what they saw, that type of thing, but there was never really, like, any yelling or what the hell were you doing out there, that type of thing. What do you think is the best way for parents to speak to their kids after maybe a game that didn't, maybe go as well as the kid would have liked it to have gone?
Boy, I wish I would have probably this is something I wasn't very good at. I'll admit it, right? My kids will tell you the first thing. Because the minute we got in the car, I couldn't wait to either get angry or, or spew. I think the best thing that you can do is give it a couple hours at a minimum. It's kind of the, there's a rule now that a lot of people try to institute as far as coaches with travel teams. And what they say is, listen, don't go ahead and go up to your coach in the moment or at the end of the game. Give it 24 hours before you're going to go ahead and talk to that coach, because nothing good is going to come out of it. Because if you go to try to attack that coach, it's going to be screaming and yelling, and who's the one who's going to be the one at a loss? It's going to be the young girl or the young boy that is out there in that moment with their parents that are yelling or screaming. So give it the 24 hours, because sometimes then you cool down, you realize maybe this isn't as bad as it was, or you can absolutely attack it in a much better way that maybe the coach is understandable and will hear what you have to say because you're calm yourself. I think the same thing's got to happen with us as a parent to our kids. I wish sometimes I gave it more than the minute the doors closed. Gee, what are you doing? I can't believe you did that today. It's ridiculous. And I know I did that. And I know a lot of the other parents have done that too. And I wish that I probably gave a little bit more time so that I can be calm myself and say, okay, let's talk about what were the positive things that happened. All right, what can we learn from that happened in this game? Like, what did you take away from this moment or this play or this reaction? Whatever it is, we have that discussion. And if you're calmer, it's going to be a much better conversation, and the kids are going to be much more apt to hear what you have to say and talk about it. 100%.
And everyone should have a 24-hour rule, whether that's in sports or in business or it's with your wife or your husband or whomever. I would challenge and say most of the time after that 24 hours passes, you're like, I either don't need to say that at all, he or she gets it. Like, I don't need to say it and rub it in, or let me say it a different way, or it's not as big of a deal as I thought it was. It's 24-hour rules, whether he's great in life and in business. And, look, I appreciate you being honest about, hey, like I used to get all fired up and get upset that when the kids had a bad game. Where did that emotion come from? Was it just, is it actually that you're angry, or is it more like you care for them, you want them to do well, and it just kind of comes out that way?
And that's exactly where it came out. And then plus you got to remember, I had the coach hat on too.
Yeah.
So in a lot of cases, like it's you're playing coach with them at the same time. So it's kind of just because I think I was wearing so many hats, from father to coach to parent to just somebody who is also watching. So there were a lot of times like I've got, you had to make sure you calm down. There are times I know that I've gotten upset, and most parents will say that they've had their moment out there too. But that would be the one that I definitely would have liked to say I would have liked to personally approve on myself.
Yeah, my dad, because I was a goalie, as you know, in hockey, and my dad, he would be forced, like this is like most goalie parents. My mom would be sitting up one place like by herself, just nervous as hell. My dad I would force him, like, you are not allowed to sit behind me at my net. Like, are you crazy? Like, I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. Like, get out of here. I got enough pressure going on right now. And luckily they listened. They were good about it. They're amazing. I'm lucky. But, there's a lot of pressure on kids these days, especially when you get into the high school level and you're playing, at a really competitive level, and you think you're trying to go to the next level, whatever that is, or you're playing with kids who are trying to go to that level. Can you kind of talk about where you kind of see pressure levels these days, and maybe how you see the best ways to kind of handle this for kids?
I got to be honest with you. The pressure to me has gotten crazier at the youngest levels.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You're seeing an 8U kid getting put into travel, whether it's basketball, whether it's baseball. Give me a couple of the others. Soccer, right? I don't care what the sport is. Hockey, all those sports. You're telling me that we're not putting pressure on these kids to make that best team, or to go out there and be productive? And the funny part is, we're doing that with an 8-year-old, where we have no idea what their body's going to look like in 4 to 5 years. And really, in 4 to 5 years is when everything's going to change, because that's when let's just say you're right now, a 4-foot 8-year-old as a goalie, and you grow to 6'5". Are you now a goalie anymore? And I'm just throwing out.
Yeah.
But you may not even be in that position that we right now put all that pressure on for you to be able to be.
Kids got to be kids. Like, I've noticed that too. Again, I'd always go back to hockey. It's just, where I have the most experience, and I have buddies who have kids who are playing younger. It's like it's getting a little crazy now. Like, having, like you said, 7, 8-year-olds, and their parents are paying $5,000 a year from them playing these travel programs. Like, guys, it doesn't really matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You got to give the kid time to breathe. He or she needs to go out. They need to play baseball, play hockey, play football, get into art, just ride their bikes around, get into a little trouble, like nothing crazy, but like they have to be kids, like, and it's tough. And that I'm glad that actually you took the conversation that way, because I'm like thinking about it, right, in terms of like pressure on high school kids, but really you're right. It starts at an even younger age now. So now these kids, starting at age like 7, 8 years old, are under serious and escalating pressure year over year over year to perform. I don't know, how do you deal with that, or like what's the solution for that, or how do maybe you see certain families or kids dealing with it the best?
It's tough, and I don't know if anybody's going to have the true answer to this, but I will say this, like, we talked a little bit about like the bodies. Let me give you a great example of baseball, okay? And this is the part where you really have to teach parents that you don't give up. Baseball goes from one size diamond at the age of 12 and under, and then you go to a completely different diamond when they turn 13. Do you know how many kids will quit the sport from 12 to 13 because the game is completely different at 13 years old, and it is no longer a game that they really enjoy or have fun with? It's not because it's a slower game, right? You're not going to hit a home run
Right.
or have a chance to hit a home run every single time that you come up. And I will tell you that I have been through multiple years of kids that have gone through. And I've coached an A team, a B team, and probably I'll even say at one point I had a C team. And I can tell you that your B and C teams sometimes will produce more players at the high school level on the high school team than the A team does.
That's actually great. I didn't even really, I knew that, but I haven't really thought about that. You're right. That's probably, I'm trying to think, what other sport does the playing surface change in size? I think at a certain age.
Nothing like that.
Yeah, not really. I mean, like, yeah, sometimes they do like the closer in games on smaller parts of the field or the court or the ice, but that's pretty wild. So obviously,
Go
ahead.
Jeff, think about the basketball player. How many kids do you see at 12 years old that are 6 foot tall already?
Yeah,
Right?
Yeah.
No, it happens, right? It's
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's say they're 5'10" at this point at 12 years old. That happens a lot. We see it. Just watch the Little League World Series. We see them all the time, right? But now think about you on a basketball court. So if you're 5'10" at 12 years old, what position are you playing? You're playing center, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then what happens when you stay 5'10" and everyone else jumped you? And now because you were pigeonholed as a center, you don't now have the skills because they didn't take care of your dribbling skills and all the things you need to do, because now you need to play some sort of guard position. Are you ready to do that? And you just spent $15,000 from 8U to 12U to be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so then if you could just offer like your best, like just general advice for parents, especially if they have kids that are younger that are getting into sports, just generally, like, how would you advise them to kind of navigate, with their kids, like, through this process?
Everyone thinks winning is the number one thing why you're doing this. Winning's great. Everyone will say that, but it's about development. If you are not on a team that's going to develop you as a player, then you're on the wrong team. Because you going to play for a team because you're going to win at 12 years old, 11 years old, 8 years old, and you're going to play right field, or you're going to be positioned in one position, a defensive player in hockey, a center in soccer. I don't care what the position is, but if you're going to be pigeonholed at one spot because of your ability at 8 years old, then you're not preparing for what's going to be the next level. You need to make sure you've got somebody that's going to help prepare you at the next level. If you don't have a coach that's going to play infield, outfield, if you don't have a coach that's going to be able to move you around, because you don't know what that body is going to be like now compared to what it's going to be at 14, 15, 16 years old, when it matters that you're about to go to the high school team.
Yeah, development is everything. And I would say that is also really great advice for even like young professionals. Like when you're looking to get your first job or you're trying to find a good fit for yourself, you really need to make sure that the company you go to is one that's going to invest in developing you, because things change quickly. It takes a lot more than most people think to win at the highest levels, and you got to start, building that foundation at the bottom. And I think it's just also a huge testament to great coaches and people out there who take that seriously and, understand what it means to take their time with kids, and that everybody develops at a different rate. Because we've all seen it. We've seen kids who you thought weren't as good as the others skyrocket past others for certain reasons, and I'm sure a lot of it has to do with their development. We've talked about like a lot of changes in youth sports. We haven't talked about the changes in coaching styles, which is something we hear a lot about, especially as you could talk about whether it's like then millennials and Gen Z and like all this kind of stuff. Have you seen a change in coaching styles, throughout the years?
No doubt. I think we're experiencing it a lot now, especially at the high school level. We're seeing a lot of older coaches that are either being asked to move on or moving on just because it's a different game. It's a different expectation. It is, you are constantly bombarded by the parents. And you have to have a certain skin to be able to take that on and have these conversations, because it's normally not from your best player, even though it is sometimes, right? But for the most part, it's normally not. But you've got to put up with so much right now that you've come into more than a coach. Listen, we're managers too at different things. How many times are we counselors?
Yeah.
How many times do we have to play more of a role than a manager at work? The coach has got that same thing, and probably even more expectations than what we do as managers. Because we as managers aren't going to get a phone call from their mom and dad asking us what's going on and why you're doing this.
Yeah.
We're going to have at least a face-to-face conversation with that person. Well, now when you get into the high school or beyond levels, you're dealing with all of the above that are getting involved in this. And then you've got to now take on is the way you talk to someone, how you talk to someone. I know as a manager for years, I've gone through, I can't tell you how many courses that'll say, make sure we're saying it this way, not this way. This is how it interprets this way versus it being interpreted this way. There are so many things that we can say or do that can get thrown back in our face that you've got to be prepared to get better to have that communication. And the problem was before, this social media and everything else that's come about, you didn't have to. You didn't want to have that conversation, you didn't. You didn't have to worry about an email coming into the school that'll have a whole litany of things that says, this is why you're good or this is why you're bad. You didn't have to worry about any of that. There was nobody hiding behind a computer. It was you had to have the face-to-face conversation. There are a lot of people that can't do that.
Yeah, I agree.
So
and
you have to.
Yeah, whether it's a coach, a manager, just anybody, out in the workforce, it's communication is everything. And we all, listen differently, are receptive to different things, and we need to be communicated with in different ways, right? And it's interesting if you study it, whether you're talking to young kids or talking to adults, if you truly understand the people on your team or the people that you're leading at work, and you can find ways to have better conversations with them and ones that are tailored towards them, it's amazing how much progress you can make. You make people feel more included. It's easier to give that tough feedback. They feel comfortable giving the feedback to you, which is really important, right? Even as a leader or a manager, you want people to feel like they can give you constructive professional feedback because we want to get better too. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. I guess, in general, how do you see the future of high school athletics in Western New York? Do you see any big changes on the horizon, or kind of how do you think the next 5 to 10 years will play out?
I don't know if it's going to play out much differently than what we're seeing right now. Obviously, we're seeing more people or more organizations right now that have been coming to Western New York, building bigger and domes, different things. That's really what I think is going to be the next big thing that we're going to start seeing is we're going to see, I bet you, and we're not far from it because I've heard rumblings of different people behind the scenes getting ready. But when are we going to see the dome that includes 4 fields inside for baseball that could be baseball and softball because you can go down and you're going to have tournaments in the middle of December? They're doing those little things right now, but I think we haven't seen that all the way here in Western New York. That I think we're going to start seeing something that's going to take it to a whole new level. They just have to figure out, John, one of the hardest things in building these things is how do you make money on them?
Right.
Because you obviously can't use them all day long. There's only a certain amount of hours of the day that they can be used. So how do you build these things, make money if you are a person that's going to go ahead and build that, but what's going to be incorporated with these domes and with these big buildings so that these people can make some money along the way?
Well, first off, I told you about the Richmond Vona Superdome in confidence, so I'm pissed that you just released it. No, I'm just kidding. That would be awesome, and like you see, probably have to be multi-use or something like that. They got to figure it out, but that would be really cool. The kids here are awesome. It's a great, amazing community. They deserve to have the best, so I hope it continues to get better. So I got one last question for you, and I always try to find a unique question to ask each of the guests. So for you, my question is, if you could go back in time or in the future to a game that hasn't happened yet and be the color commentator for one game, what would it be and why?
That's a hard one. if I had to do one thing differently myself, would be when I was younger. 'Cause I was a big track athlete that you and I have talked about. And I had so many opportunities where I could have gone on to the other sport and I still hung on. I really wish I would have played on that football field a little bit more myself because of the speed that I had that I was younger. And also on the baseball field that I wish I did more on, because I was a third baseman and did very well on third base when I played all the way up to the point I did. I wish I would have put more time in some of those other sports. As far as color game is concerned, I've called some pretty good games. I really have. I mean, I've called state championship games already. I called my alma mater in the state championship game already. Like, I've had some neat things. If I would have liked to call, the only games I never called was my son Zachary. So I wish I could have gone back and been able to be on one of his calls. But I've been on a call for Jordan's games. I've been on a call for Luke's games. Zachary, I didn't get a chance to make that call, and I guess I would have liked to call my one son something with him as well.
That's awesome. Well, look, man, this has been amazing. I really appreciate it. Always love talking to you. And again, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Anytime. You can ask anytime. This stuff's fun when we can just have a fun conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to Angles. If this episode made you think, smile, or see something in a new way, follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a review and share it with friends. You can also follow us on social media. Angles is produced by Brett Tuttle. I'm John Richmond. See you next time.